Zipho Sikhakhane is a sought-after global speaker, thought leader, writer, and business strategist. She also serves on several boards and has a Master of Business Administration from Stanford University in the United States. A lifetime entrepreneur and angel investor, she also founded EMZ Advisory, a management consulting firm operating since 2015, enabling leaders and businesses to unleash their growth potential. In this podcast, she shares about her journey to self-discovery and accelerated growth in life, career, and business on a more intimate setting, a podcast.
Welcome to Mastery Sessions with Zipho.
There are some tools to really look at that can help with grounding as you're thinking about the journey ahead. As we wrap up the series of the podcast, the final episode is then a step back, one in sort of connecting the dot, between grounding, optimism, and confidence, but also deepening your sense of grounding so that the interconnectedness of these themes can really come to life. Because when they start connecting and you start seeing the relationship within all of them, that's ultimately where self-mastery comes from, right? And reaching a level of self-mastery requires deepening of your own consciousness, deepening of your own self-awareness as an individual so that you can really understand yourself better, but also be more effective as an individual as you ultimately do different things and involve yourself in different things that are going to help you. Some of the things that are important as you're thinking about mastery, right, is especially assuming now you're more confident, you're more optimistic, and you have a bit of understanding from a grounding perspective. When you have that self-mastery, you'll know your decisions, right? They're much sounder. Your relationships are much stronger. You also communicate you more effectively, and you even more effective in whatever sort of professional context or any hobbies or activities that you involve yourself with, right? And even your knowledge and that power to just understand yourself in a different way is really helpful, because then what it does is that it influences how you behave. You have more mastery over how you behave. It's less impulsive, but actually coming from a much more informed state of mind, basically. It gives you a certain level of clarity. So on the journey of deepening your grounding, it's important to always seek out feedback and inputs from others, right? In terms of, are you living in a way that's aligned with your best interest? And also finding individuals that can just be candid and honest with you as much as possible. Find people that will help you, keep yourself accountable. Because sometimes we get stuck in the clouds and we need to come back to the ground, solidify ourselves and get to a point where we're a little bit more level-headed, basically, and stuff. And so when you're then thinking about strengthening that, right, it will help you also accurately identify some of your thoughts and your feelings and your impulses. And you'll be able to see, are these coming from a grounded place or not? Even when you're in conflict, eventually you realize it's not about the butter, that you're busy arguing about. What is it in depth that's really driving this this thing that you feel much upset about and you feel it's important to actually address at this very moment? So let's talk a bit about consciousness, right? So it's something that I've invested in over the years as part of my journey, and there's two experts that I actually respect a lot on this, and there's Oprah Winfrey, and there's also Eckhart Tolle. And it's very interesting. The two of them and I have one thing in common, right? And it's just this love we have of just this nature around us, but particularly, the plants, right? I know myself and Oprah, we love trees. There's just, when you're in there, when you're in that space, there's something that comes to life. There's a feeling that you get when you're just in that stillness. And I know with Eckhart Tolle, that passion of just the flowers, right? When you're just standing there for hours, that's why I became so passionate about flower photography, is so much transforms, right? And there's so much stillness and there's so much peace that you get a level of grounding when you're in that space. I respect them both, from an insights perspective when it comes to consciousness, and the way in which they express the different language about how you observe, how you experience, and also how you become aware of your existence, right? And unlocking even that higher level of consciousness. But I love how the perspectives rely on is as simple as just everyday life and experiences, right? right? Sometimes when you're thinking too much, sometimes when you find yourself being overconsumed, right? Go into that space, right, where you could actually feel and start feeling more conscious, right? My good example is, I'm always in admiration. I mean, if you just look at the concept of a simple tree, right, on a day-to-day basis, I mean, the seasons it goes through, right, it changes its shape, its form. I mean, there's times it doesn't have its leaves, it doesn't have its fruits. It's probably at its weakest, as far as its beauty or fruits are concerned, but it's always staying firm and it's staying solid and it's staying, as if it's, that strength, right? Even in the worst of seasons, and in the best of seasons, it shines at its best. I mean, the flowers, the leaves, it's absolutely beautiful. It doesn't say, you know what, last season was really bad, and so I'm going to hold parts of myself. I'm not going to show my light to the world. It just shows its light. Even sometimes, I mean, there's these species called humans. I mean, they come and hit the tree with the car, they cut off the leaves, they cut off the branches too. I mean, the tree doesn't go, oh, I'll never give them my best shade, consistently with that grace and that strength and that solidity. That's where I get that inspiration and that insight about consciousness. But you could get it from many different experiences in life, right? And looking at how your thoughts play out. When do you start feeling more alive? And also finding different ways of saying, you know what? I'm not going to hold myself back. Even when I'm not feeling at my best, what is the best version of myself that I can bring given the circumstances that I'm in now? And it takes a process of learning, right? And I can recommend Eckhart Tolle's book on the power of now. I also enjoyed another book, Untethered Soul, that I read last year. So there's many, good books and also insights on this, but the journey is actually embodying, experiencing, and actually living this, and actually learning and getting to a point where you're able to separate and be part of the process as it's going, as it's happening around you. And you get to that point where you reach a high level of consciousness, right, as an individual. And you become even more aware of everything that's going on around you. And also, even when you may be risking exhausting yourself or you're risking being unkind to yourself, you're able to pick that out, right? I think in the Untethered Soul, they called it the roommate, that's the voice in your head that will always be there, saying certain things, sending certain messages. And we're always listening to it. Or when we don't listen, we're always trying to fight it. And what happens if you actually just welcome it and you say, you know what, this is a roommate that I'm stuck with, okay? And sometimes it may be unkind. It lives in my head. I'm trying to sleep. It's still going on. Being conscious is realizing that part is actually separate from you and actually who you are. Some people actually try different activities just to get themselves to a point where you sort of force yourself to a point where everything else stops because you have to focus on this one thing and you see a different level of consciousness. I mean, some people have tried mountain climbing, car racing, and so forth. And in that moment when you just have to focus and you're just intense and you're alive, I mean, you feel completely free of time, freedom of thought, freedom of anything that might be getting in your way. For me, one of the things that I've also enjoyed that takes me in that space is rock climbing. It's something that I introduced the last couple of years. And something happens, when you're up there and you start realizing, wait, my human body can actually go up this high, and you're busy thinking, but what happens if I fall? And you're busy thinking, this looks impossible. Your body's saying this feels like a challenge. And there's so many things you're trying to balance at the same time. And then a new level of consciousness just comes in that moment. And all of a sudden you see yourself summiting things that you didn't even think that were possible for you before. So I think it's important to realize those things and that it is possible to get yourself to that state, but you need to try and find those activities that get you there. One of the things that's also happened is that as I do the activities that actually increase my level of consciousness, is I start realizing that as human beings we also made we made of more than what we actually are aware of. One of the experts that I really admire on the topics of just becoming even more aware of even the feelings and the experiences that we go through as a human is Brené Brown, whom I mentioned as a researcher and an author. And I've been following her work and I've admired how she grows, year on year in terms of deepening her insights on this, whether it's sort of the early days where she was helping us identify, the gifts of, imperfection that we all have, learning to be vulnerable, learning learning to be vulnerable, learning the courage, right, to keep going, irrespective of all the things that are happening around us. But more particularly, one of the things that I enjoyed more recently was this book that she released, which is called The Atlas of the Heart, and it's 70 plus, just different words that she was helping us understand that represent a whole myriad of human emotion, which we all have, but we just haven't invested in really understanding it in depth. And for someone like myself who's very much an optimist and chooses positivity as the default, there's really unpleasant human emotions that have their place in all of us. And when you're more grounded, you start being able to accept those, to appreciate those, and realize that they're also significant. I mean, things like anger, things like frustration. These are now new emotions that I'm actually getting into the depth of, and I'm realizing, look, they have their place, even for a more positive and more optimistic person like me, because ultimately we're all holistic as individuals, and we have these unpleasant and pleasant experiences that we go through, and these emotions sit in our body, and the more we find ways to work through them and address them, the more we are able to actually succeed and get to the other side. And thus we conclude the first series of our podcast as we really explore what it takes for us as individuals to get to a certain level of success and effectiveness in how we lead different areas of our lives. It really requires us to conquer a lot of self-limiting beliefs that we have about ourselves and the world around us. You need to look inside of us to understand how we really behave, why we behave the way that we do, and what's really motivating it and driving it. And in the book that I'm working on, we actually go into much more depth, on some of the techniques and some of the principles that you can really leverage to be able to master these topics. And maybe there's other topics that you find are really powerful, that are really of interest. Maybe they even helped you in your journey. I'll be very keen to learn more about those. And so I encourage you to stay optimistic, to stay grounded, to stay confident, and knowing that when these things are interconnected, that's truly where we find the essence of who we really are and get to the success that we aspire to get to.